Rocky Top Insider presents the RTI Lowdown with Bob Baskerville and Chris Lowe. Welcome. Time for another edition of the RTI Lowdown. Have a lot going on. We got a lot to recover here and talk about, so let's do it. I'm Bob Baskerville, joined as always by my trusty friend and co-host. Looks like he might be in witness protection, but he's actually doing some other stuff for his job with On3 national coverage there. Chris Lowe. Chris, how are you, my man?
Hey, Bob. It's good to be with you. Good to do another week of sort of making the rounds. It's I'd be remiss if I didn't say it's a little sad that the basketball season's over for the Vols. Certainly the way they played for the first three rounds, but it's I remind people, I know we've talked about it, it's not every day the Vols make three straight Elite Eight. So
right.
I hope Tennessee fans, despite the way the season ended with the blowout loss to Michigan, can understand and appreciate that this is the greatest run in Tennessee basketball history.
No doubt. And it ended with a bit of a thud. We know that, but no, what a great run. And we'll talk a little about that. First thing though, I would say is for those of you checking us out, we always appreciate the support. If you're watching us on YouTube, on the Rocky Top Insider YouTube channel, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. That always makes a big difference for us as we're continuing to grow our audience. You may listen to us as a podcast too, and that's fantastic as well. Just make sure you download us, make us part of your regular rotation. We're available wherever you listen to your podcasts. Like we said, a lot to discuss. We'll remind you that it is actually spring football season, which we know when you're at an SEC school, that's kind of that always wins the day. And that's some of the work Chris is doing, I think, with On3 right now. But we'll talk a little bit about that. But before we get to it, we'll talk a teeny bit about what was a horrific Sunday for Tennessee's other athletic programs, not football. It started with the basketball team getting stuffed in a locker by Michigan in the Vols' third straight attempt to advance to a Final Four. Then Vol baseball gets swept in a series at Vanderbilt that ended in almost inexplicable walk-off fashion and ended with the Lady Vols softball team getting a win. But on Sunday, that win only averted a series sweep for the Lady Vols. In short, it was a tough weekend for Vols fans, but we're here to cover it all for you, including the fact, like I said, we're in the thick of spring football, so we'll share some thoughts on what we're hearing so far about Josh Heupel's crew. Before all of that, though, let's give a quick shout out to our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by the Tate Insurance Group. If you're in the market for a great locally based insurance professional to help you with your home, your car, or business coverage, you don't need to look any further. It's the Tate Insurance Group. And we sure do appreciate their partnership with the Lowdown. Topic A, we're not going to go too much into reconciling the past, but we do need to talk for a second because it does set us up for what we talk about relative to the future for Tennessee basketball. They ride a roller coaster of emotions over the weekend, delivering an impressive win on a late night game Friday night to advance to their third straight Elite Eight, but then wrap up their season with a no doubt about it loss to top seed Michigan. But I think, Chris, I'd be remiss if I didn't say the game Friday night was perhaps one of the best coaching performances we saw from Rick Barnes and the coaching staff this whole season. I think this whole season's been a great coaching job, given some of the gaps with that team. But I felt like Friday night we capitalized on Iowa State not having their best player available. Joshua Jefferson was still nursing a severe high ankle sprain. Vols seized the opportunity. Close game in the first half, but they dominated in the second. And I felt like that gave me a little bit of hope for the Elite Eight game. But that Friday night game was a big win.
I thought it was probably one of Tennessee's better overall defensive efforts. And you're right. Iowa State missing their big gun was a huge help to Tennessee. Certainly to be able to dominate the paint the way the Vols did, but just not letting them have anything easy from the perimeter. And that was the key. And you knew that that was going to be Tennessee's game plan. But they executed to perfection. Boswell was outstanding. They got help. Tennessee fought off screens. They were on top of everything. They anticipated every pass. You know, it wasn't a pretty basketball game, but it was by Tennessee standards, the way they like to play and grind and beat you up and make everything hard. It was almost vintage basketball. Maybe not pretty basketball, but vintage basketball for Tennessee. And that's the way they've had to win games this year. They've had to sort of grind it out, keep teams from making a lot of threes, second chance points, offensive rebounds, a lot of effort stuff. And you saw that across the board in their win over Iowa State.
Yeah, Tennessee had almost as many offensive rebounds in that game as Iowa State had in total rebounds for the game. So Tennessee kind of had their way, particularly in the second half. And all of that neutralized the fact. One thing we knew is Iowa State is elite on the defensive side. They're number one in the country in forcing turnovers for a Power 5 program. Tennessee had turnovers. They had 17 of them, but it almost didn't matter. Everything else in the game kind of neutralized the sloppiness that Iowa State kind of promotes via their defense. So big win. Again, close game at halftime. Vols choked the Cyclones out in the second half, and they move on and advance to their third straight Elite Eight, like we mentioned earlier in the show. They're one of only two teams that can currently stake that claim. Their reward was playing an elite Michigan team, and we all knew the only way our guys were going to pull off an upset of the Wolverines was to play a perfect game, and it wasn't perfect, nowhere near it. Michigan had a lot to do with it. They absolutely, I put in my notes, they stir-fried the Vols, 95-62. This thing, man, Chris, stating the obvious, Michigan they're a wagon. They are one of the two best teams in college basketball this season. And even starting a bit slow, giving Tennessee a little hope, they just flipped a switch and, man, they went on that, I think, what was it, a 21-2 run in the middle of the first half. And that was pretty much game, set, and match.
Tennessee saw where they need to get to if they're going to take that next step. And it's been hard. You know, you get to the Elite Eight is quite an accomplishment, but to get to the Final Four, and I think you also got to look at draws. And Tennessee has not gotten great draws when they've gotten to the Elite Eight. They played Purdue, they played Houston, and they played Michigan. And you know, they haven't been able to get one of those draws where maybe it was a team that had been a little bit of Cinderella and fought its way there, and maybe was running out of gas. You see that sometimes. They played really good basketball teams in all their Elite Eight appearances. And, yeah, Michigan is a scary team. They got length. They can shoot. They've got guard play. They got the big guy inside, the 7-footer. You knew that Tennessee was probably going to have to play its best game of the season. And Michigan was probably going to have to play a C type of game or C- type of game for Tennessee to win. And, that, you know, it was – even though Tennessee held its own for the first, 8-9 minutes of the game, when Michigan got it rolling, it was like a snowball going downhill. Tennessee had no chance.
Yeah,
they just couldn't match up with them. Couldn't match up with Michigan.
Now, I was just going to say we had an RTI thread going live during that game on Sunday, and somebody said, and it was pretty appropriate, like, this felt like a Harlem Globetrotters game, and we were not the Globetrotters. We were the Washington Generals. Yeah, it was rough. As a matter of fact, these last two Elite Eight games, this one and the one last season against Houston, Tennessee's been outscored 82-41 in those last two first halves. So it's great to get to this level in back-to-back seasons, but it does feel like it's become a plateau for the program. And like you said, Chris, I'm 100% with you. I said this after the loss. It's like, it has never been more clear to me what is staring this program in the face. It's not about coaching. It's really about talent. Michigan, their starting five, 4 of them were grown men, and they were transfers, you know, and that's the new script in college basketball these days. You know, we're seeing it. You know, there's a couple teams in the Final Four that are built that way. Illinois is another one, and you know, and even Arizona has a lot of players who played professionally overseas. You know, so that's a good segue, honestly, because the Vols finished their season 25-12. Most losses since I think it was the 2020 season, which was coming off the heels of that great 2019 team. And that season ended up getting cut short anyway at the end by COVID. But it's time to look forward, how to get over this hump. And it's clear based on what we've seen in the last couple of days since that loss. It's been about 48 hours since that loss, but Coach Barnes and the staff, they are off and running, Chris.
I don't think there's any question about what this team needs. They've got to have guys who can score. You're always going to play. Rick Barnes' teams are always going to play defense. They're always going to rebound. They're going to be a team that's tough, that will hang in there. But if they're going to make that next jump, I don't think there's any way to emphasize any more than they've got to have some more help scoring the basketball. They've got to have a point guard, clearly. They've got to have perimeter shooters. And I think they've got to have a player like a Grant Williams. When's the last time Grant Williams is the last time they've had a guy with, a 6'8", 6'9" kind of guy that you can dump it into him and get a basket when you needed to.
Yep.
He could step out and score. He was a good free throw shooter. They need someone like that. They need a 6'7", 6'8", 6'9" scorer. And not necessarily a guy that's a defensive player, but a guy that they know in the half court, if they're not making their threes, they can go into him. And maybe a guy that can face up a little bit, Bob. Maybe a guy that can take the ball and score. But they've got to have more scoring punch offensively. I don't think there's any big doubt. People understand that. The question is how many. I thought they were a guard or two light this year.
Yeah.
When I watched them early, and they were. They just had some guys that didn't pan out. I think the way that Rick thought they were. But they've got to have at least, I think, 3 more.
Yeah. Yeah, Rick talked about it after the game and said it, and he sees it. Of course he does. He's like, we need to shoot better. I think my armchair coach hat being worn here, we saw last year against Houston, we had a shooter. We had a couple shooters in Jordan Gainey and Chaz Lanier. But we got bullied by Houston underneath, right? That was grown man basketball, and they were so physical, and we couldn't move that rock in the first half of that game. So I feel like maybe some of the way the roster was built this season, it was to kind of go in that direction of, hey, we're not going to get beat like that again in the paint. We're going to be stronger inside. But we did it, and probably at the expense of outside shooting. And Rick and the coaching staff tried, right? I mean, some of it was just economics in this day and age of NIL. We had Jacoby Gillespie. They were looking at some of the others like Rodney Rice and Isaac McNeely, and other things got in the way. Rice, it became a money issue, whatever the case may be. And it feels like, so this year, while we might be tougher on the inside, we were missing more on the perimeter. So now, again, that's where it's got to go. And here's the thing. We lose a total of 4 seniors. Graham Hurst is one that doesn't play much, but he's a senior. Amari Abram was at the end of the bench for most of the back half of this season. But Jacoby Gillespie and Felix Okpara, really key contributors. They're gone. Also highly likely we'll be losing Nate Ament. There's certainly a groundswell of support of, man, it'd be great if Nate had a second year and came back and he could maybe be a top 3 or 4 pick next year in the draft. And that's lovely to think about, but business is business. I'll be shocked if Nate sticks around. Yeah,
and you're seeing different projections of where he may go. Some still have him in the top 8 or 10. Some have him sliding out of the top 15. At the end of the day, I just think that's too much money to roll the dice. And he would still get a lot of money. I mean, he'd get $4 or $5 million, but you're talking about contracts in the first round of the NBA, $20, $25, $30 million, depending on where he goes.
Yeah.
And kids aren't going to turn down that kind of money. Very, very few kids will. Yeah. And if you look at it as a business decision, Bob, I don't see how you could.
No, I agree. Also, another key loss, not a real surprise, but associate head coach Justin Gainey is moving on. He was just recently named the new head basketball coach at North Carolina State, back where he played. Big move for Justin. Again, I think it's one that once Will Wade left to go to LSU, it felt like this time around, it felt like Justin was definitely going to be in the mix. He gets the job, so That's one that I don't think we're going to see a change or a new addition to the coaching staff, at least not for the next week or so, because I think the focus is on the portal right now. But first off, too, as far as what's returning, Rick also in that post-game presser affirmed that he's coming back. And again, by the way of what we've seen with the activity here in these first couple of days since that loss, I mean, he's not taking a break, man. He is back at it. Probably doesn't surprise you a bit. It doesn't surprise me at all, CeeLo.
Well, yeah, and he knows Rick's warmed up to the whole portal. I think he realizes, you know what, you go get 2 to 4 guys in the portal, and you don't have to go recruit maybe the high schools quite as much as you did. And plus, you know more about these guys. You've seen them play in college. You've watched film of their college games. In some cases, maybe they played against them. So, I think he's got a pretty good idea of the kind of kid he wants in his program, those kids that are going to prosper in his program. And you don't see many guys that come in. You see a few, but once they're there and they're bonded with the team, it's they're there for all their guys beside them. I like the class, the freshman class they brought in. I still think there's a lot of upside for a guy like Amari Evans. You've got the Henderson kid. I think Bob is really one that if he can come on and get healthy, I'm talking about the point guard,
right,
and be a guy they can count on next year, that would be a huge addition to this team.
Yeah, let's talk about that. There's a core of 8 guys, if you exclude Nate Ament and you assume that he's moving on to the NBA. There's 8 guys that are still in the mix as far as returning players. JP Estrella, Bishop Boswell, Jalen Carey, Cade Phillips, who we almost forget about because he's missed most of the season due to injury, Dwayne Brown, Troy Henderson, who you mentioned, and then Ethan Berg and Clarence Masamba. And Henderson's an interesting one because what I'll tell you, CeeLo, is I've just been hearing in the last 24 hours that there's a little bit of chatter he may test the waters in the portal. And that would be unfortunate because I'm with you. I think he could be a really, really great point guard over time. He needs a little more time to develop, but I think that's what's going to happen. Out of those 8, I mean, I'm not sure all of them will stick around. There's also rumors, former Vol assistant Rod Clark, who's at Indiana now. There's a little bit of chatter out there that maybe he's kind of kicking around a few things. I think JP Estrella and certainly Amari Evans, those 2 are going to be targets in this thing for sure. I think those are the ones we're going to have to play a little defense if we want to make sure we keep them.
Yeah, and I know Rick would love to keep that group together of freshmen, as many of them as possible, and let them continue to grow together in the program. That's big a lot of times when you already have that kind of chemistry. It sort of wears off on the rest of the players.
Yeah. Now, what's interesting is just yesterday, Jalen Carey talked to the media and said he really wants to come back. He recognizes he owned the fact that he wasn't in the best shape that he could be in. He needs to lose some weight, and he wants to be a leader next year. And that's fine to hear. I have to say, for a guy I've been pretty critical of most of the season, I mean, Carey in the tournament, he didn't play much in the Miami game. I think that was just a matchup issue. But man, the remaining 3 games in the tournament, I think he was a factor. I think we saw a little different version of Jalen Carey, and I'd be good with him sticking around. I just think the question is, can he accept what the role would be in terms of playing time, et cetera, with the assumption that we're going to be adding players from the portal and there's other freshmen coming in. There's going to be a lot of new guys.
There is, but that's basketball now. It's
right.
College basketball. Every year you're turning over at least half your roster, sometimes more than half. And how quickly you can get those guys on campus, you can mesh them in with other players. As you said, figure out what role that they are needed to play and over and above what role you want to play. Because sometimes you bring in guys at this level who've been stars of their high school basketball team, but you turn them into more of a defensive guy. And I think that's the hardest thing with the portal is, the 2 of us know enough about hoops. We can go watch a kid play and say, well, this kid's really good. He's a high major one. But what you don't know, Bob, is when you get that guy on campus, how is he going to fit in with the rest of his teammates? What's he going to be like in the locker? When things go bad, is he going to be one to sulk? When things go bad for other guys, will he be one to sort of be there and say, hey, we got your back? And there's just sort of such a short amount of time that you can recruit in the portal. It happens so fast. You don't have a lot of time to get to know people.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. It is a fast moving train to be sure. And I think that's a good segue into, so we know who's at least on paper returning. I said 8 players. There's actually 9 if you do count Amari Evans, and we absolutely should. He might be right near the top of the list on guys we want to keep. But there's some targets from the portal that are already getting talked about. Now, keep in mind, the portal opens on April 7th once the NCAA tournament is fully complete. But players are currently entering the portal. They're announcing their intentions. And in some instances, particularly if you're a grad student, you can take it even a step further and start making your visits, because I think the visits starting next week for non-grad students, the portal opens on the 7th, but I think it's a 2-day window before they can start officially making visits. But like we said, Tennessee is moving, man. They've already had a visit. One of them is wrapping up his second day in Knoxville. And let's talk for a second about this guy, Tyler Lundblade from Belmont. This guy was the Missouri Valley Conference Player of the Year, 6'5", pick and pop guy, really good shooter, averages about 15 points a game, almost 16. Shot 41% from three-point range this season. Last season, he had lower usage a little bit, but last season shot nearly 50% from three-point range. And there's a video floating around on social media of him doing a workout where he took 179 three-pointers and he made 174 of them. So he's also, all this stuff is amplified for us, CeeLo, because of what we went through this season. Guy's a 93% free throw shooter, one of the best in the country at the line. And so the guy's visited Knoxville. Doesn't mean he's coming here, but clearly he's not a defensive force, by the way. So this tells us what you just were saying earlier. Rick continues his adjustment to the way college basketball is becoming. And it's like, you need a little bit of all this, right?
Well, the thing that jumps out to me is when you look at some of the shooters he's brought in, you go back to a Dalton Connect. Now, the Dalton was probably as much a scorer as he was a shooter.
Right.
When you watch this kid play, and I've watched some tape on him, his release, man, is really quick. He doesn't need a lot of room or a lot of time to get the ball off. Plus, he's 6'4", 6'5". So, he's going to have a favorable matchup on a lot of guards, a lot of people that he plays against. But that's the thing I look for. How much time does it take a guy to wind up? Does he have to wind up? Does he need a lot of space to get his shot off? And watching tape on him, he's really good. The way he comes off picks, his ability to be ready, to catch and shoot, all those things that you want from a shooter, and just his productivity, Bob. He really's got a nice stroke and clearly very confident shooting the basketball. I think Tennessee could use 2 of those kind of guys. 2 guys that we used to call them no-leave guys you just absolutely cannot leave.
Yeah.
And you get a couple of those guys on the floor, and it's been a while. Tennessee's had some guys that made threes, but they were a little inconsistent, a little helter-skelter. But some guy who can consistently knock down threes, and maybe even get a second guy. Maybe it's the point guard, because they certainly need a point guard. But having 2 guys like that in the same game who are elite three-point shooters makes a big difference.
No doubt. And, that what's different about this guy, too, you mentioned Dalton, and I think it's been kind of a progression in a way. Dalton was a 3-level scorer. Right. Chaz Lanier last year was more of a shooter-oriented player, but he could do a little more. This guy looks like he is he's a shooter. He doesn't look like he's going to take many players off the dribble. He's going to work screens, all those things. But I would argue that what's good about that is that creates floor spacing. And like you said, man, if we could get 2 of those kind of guys, that could be a total game changer.
Yeah, and I think they will. I think that's certainly one of Rick's priorities. I mean, they got to get a point guard. That's pretty obvious. You got to get a shooter.
Yeah.
But I think you dive deeper and you go for a third perimeter player who, if you had to, could play the guard, the point. And again, I don't want it to sound like I'm writing off Henderson, because I do think he could be a good player. But it's once you get to the postseason, it's such a guards game, a game where you've got to be able to create points, to shoot the basketball when you get open shots. And I think as many of those guys as you can get, there's never too much. And now they're going to have to play defense. They're going to come play for Rick Barnes.
Right.
But I don't think you can have too many shooters.
Yeah, I agree. You talk about point guard, and let's fan out on that a little bit. Another name that's coming up, he's in the portal. Now, whether Tennessee's made contact or not, we have no idea, right? They're going to play that stuff close to the vest. But Joel Foxwell is a point guard from Portland University. Pretty good size for point guard, 6'2", 6'3", averages 16 points, 4 rebounds, 6.5 assists. He's an Australian kid. He's one that we need to keep an eye on because it sounds like he'll be in play for a lot of programs. Other names, Rodney Rice, if that rings a bell, he was in the mix for us last season, but it came down, like I said earlier in the show, to economics. But he only played about 10 games this season because he had a season-ending injury. But the boy played well. He averaged 20-plus points a game at USC. It sounds like he might be re-entering the portal. We talked about Tyler Lundblade, another name that's popping out there. We have no idea if it's going to be on Tennessee's radar, but a couple stages with this guy, who, by the way, would be the most coveted point guard in the portal if this were to happen, is Tyler Tanner at Vanderbilt, who we saw a lot of firsthand. Tyler, first, after they exited the tournament, he mentioned, "I'm coming back. I'm not going into the NBA draft. I'm going to keep playing." And then yesterday he puts an announcement out that with him wearing a jersey with no name on it, saying that he has signed with CAA. What that tells me, CeeLo, is they are going to test the waters for sure, and probably for big dollars. And hey, we can always hope, but man, you want to talk about like hitting a home run if you could somehow wrestle that kid away from Vanderbilt or beat some other school out for him. Man, that'd be a home run for Tennessee.
I thought he was, certainly the last part of the season, he was as good a point guard as I saw in college basketball.
I agree.
His ability to distribute and defend and score. I mean, he's a great shooter. He could get to the basket. He's not like a huge guy by any stretch, but the way he could get to the basket and finish, a lot of fun to watch play. Now, I saw that same social media post that CAA had signed him. He's got a shirt on with no logo, no Vandy, no nothing.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, this is almost like a scene on Jerry Maguire, and that's show me the money. And I think that's what he was saying. And his agents were saying at that point, hey, we'll listen. You got the kind of cash to bring him in, we'll listen. We don't care who you are. And I think that includes Tennessee. And to get him in the backcourt with some of the other guys who are going to try to surround him, really for any school, not just Tennessee, would be massive.
Yeah, totally agree. Like I said, this is kind of wish list conversation, but man, that would get some people excited, myself included. We're going to need a rim protector, likely. I mean, I think of JP Estrella, if he's coming back, he's not necessarily a defensive stalwart. Cade Phillips coming back is a good thing because Cade's got that ability to also guard the perimeter, and he's a pretty proficient shot blocker. Dwayne Brown, pretty good at that too. But a couple guys entered the portal today that I want to just mention because I think they're noteworthy when it comes to what Tennessee's looking for. One of them is from Georgia out of the SEC, Samtu Cyril, who is a 7-footer, 6'11", led the SEC in blocked shots, led the nation in dunks. Very similar game for the most part to what Felix Okpara brings. As a matter of fact, he went to the same prep school in Chattanooga that Felix did, Hamilton Heights. They both played there. And the thing with Cyril is he gets in foul trouble pretty easily, has actually been ejected a few times for just rough play, just can't control himself. He's not he's not like a thug, but I, I just think he plays so physical that, it's taken its toll. I'm guessing Rick Barnes could, coach that part out of him. But again, that's going to be another guy. All these guys we're talking about are going to have many suitors, right?
Yeah, I mean, and that's why they're in the portal right now. Is agents are working the phone, talking to different schools, and
Yeah.
you know how that works, Bob. They're playing one
Yep.
school over another, and what could you get? We could get him this, but Tennessee's in that game, and they've been at that game. I don't think Rick was standing up and sharing about it, but they've been in that game really now for 3 years. When you think about
Yeah.
going back and getting to some of the guys they've gotten, and if you don't get guys and plug them in like that, I don't care how you recruited in high school. You've just got to go get guys who have played, who've got experience on those stages, and you're seeing the schools. You mentioned Michigan, you mentioned UConn, some of those teams that have a lot of those guys. You have got to find guys who have experience, because a lot of times, even if you bring in a high school kid, let's use Nate Amen as an example, and I do think he's probably going to turn pro. He could certainly use another a year working in the Rick Barnes system, but I think the money's too great. It's a business decision. But you look at a guy like that, if you bring in two, say, big fours, a big 6'10" who's a blocker, and somebody else around him, I mean, they just make each other so much better. I mean, it'd be awesome to see him in a Tennessee uniform for one more year. I don't think that's realistic, but you do have to spend your money wisely and bring in the right kind of guys.
Yeah, agreed. One more name I'll mention, and then we'll move on. This guy just entered the portal in the last couple hours. Juke Harris from Wake Forest. And this kid is another one. You talk about a wing guy, Chris, that could shoot the ball. This kid is 6'7", averaged 21.5 points a game, 6.5 boards, a couple assists at Wake Forest. Shot 45% from the field. And again, this is a guy, there's a reason they're announcing their intentions right now, because they, like you said, they want to drum up the interest. It's going to be interesting. These are all players that could help this Tennessee squad next season, but it's like, what are you going to pay for them? That's going to be the question.
I sort of go back and forth on the money, because I think Tennessee paid over $10 million this year, maybe closer to 12 for their roster. But to me, it's how do you spend it? Do you spend it wisely? And Tennessee's hit on some of the big names. We mentioned Dalton Connect, you mentioned Chaz, and paid handsomely to get those guys.
Right.
And then certainly, Amen coming out of high school. But I think finding guys that fit and finding guys that can plug the holes that you need. And again, I know we're pounding the horse, but guys that can score, because they've been able to get guys that play that grinded out, gritty ball that Rick wants you to play. You look at all the post players. Now you're losing an Akpara, but you got Cade Phillips coming back. But finding guys that fit, I think, probably is as important as any. And if they're going to get over this hump, and I'm as convinced of this as any, because he's gotten them there. And Rick's gotten them there because of his teams take on his personality, and they play so hard. They go after the basketball. They make it so hard to score on them. They're going to have to be able to sort of take that next step and find guys that can score and guys that can create their own shots and get to the basket. So I think when they spend their money, and listen, I mean, Rick Barnes knows this better than I do, I think that's where they're going to try to spend it. Because there, to me, is a clear gap. When I look at the teams left right now in the Final Four, Bob, there is a clear gap when it comes to just skilled shot making, the ability to score, and the ability to get to the basket. A clear gap between those teams and Tennessee.
No, I agree. I think that's the thing, the whole debate of age versus, youth. And those are both metrics of age. But my point is, just what you're saying with Michigan, all those guys have extensive experience. Arizona's got two really, really good freshmen, but they balance it with some very, very experienced guys. And I think you're not going to see a freshman class next season like we're seeing this season. Tennessee has 3 freshmen coming in. And though, we didn't even talk about Manny Green, Ralph Scott, and Marquise Clark, but those guys, they could all be contributors too. But it is going to be imperative imperative to get some guys in who, like you said earlier, guys that you feel like you've gotten a bit of a sample size for what they've done so far, whether it's at a high mid-major or at, in some of these instances like Cyril from Georgia and Juke Harris from Wake Forest, Tyler Tanner at Vanderbilt. They've been playing at a power conference level already. You got to have those guys, man. It's like table stakes now. And I am very, I'm very encouraged that Rick Barnes and those guys have bounced back, that within 24 hours of being, kicked out of the NCAA tournament by Michigan, they're already out there talking to players, where they can, right? Where it's legally permissible for them to do that. It's a great sign. It makes me very, very encouraged and optimistic about what next season could be for this team. Because you mentioned it too, the core that's returning. If we can bring most of those guys back, that's a good core of role players. Now you need a couple guys who can really lead the charge by bucket getters and rim protectors and a point guard who can create all those things. It's a big remit for the coaching staff, but I've got all the faith in the world that they know exactly what they need to pursue.
Well, just getting to this point, and I agree.
Yeah.
I think this was probably one of Rick's best jobs, to get this team
right
to the Elite Eight, because it was a team that was flawed, in several different ways. Certainly not their effort, not their ability to, to hang around in games and find ways to win, but just you look at some of the teams that didn't make it as far as Tennessee this year. Well, Florida was a much more talented basketball team. They got beat. They got upset.
Yeah.
Before Tennessee. And I think you could point to several other teams in the league. I mean, Alabama, I think certainly they had guard play, the kind of guard play and depth that Tennessee didn't have. I think Kentucky, even though Kentucky was – it's hard, they spent $22 million on that roster. But when I watch their guys play, and this is a testament to Rick and his staff and the culture he's built, individually, if the two of us went to a gym right now and you put Kentucky's guys on one end and Tennessee's on the other, they look and probably are a much more skilled basketball team, certainly offensively. And finding a way to blend some of those guys in to the culture that Rick's created, the toughness and defensive and rebounding culture, is the only way I think Tennessee can close that gap. Again, I thought Michigan, and when I watched them this year earlier, was the best team I saw. Arizona would be right there. And you talk about culture and toughness and playing to a standard. What Hurley's done at UConn is incredible. And they've done it. He's brought in some really key transfers. Now, they brought in some guys from the high school ranks that could play, but you look at some of the key transfers that have come in after they lost really good players and made a difference. But it's going to be a big jump. And I never thought I would see 3 straight Elite Eights or 4 straight Sweet 16s. As I get older, I'm 60 now, Bob. I'm starting to wonder, is the good Lord going to let me hang around long enough to see Tennessee make the Final Four? I think if they're going to do that, they've got to figure out a way to not make it as difficult, because even some of their wins this year, it was tough. It was almost like you're laboring through those games, because I go back to games like the Mississippi State game on the road.
Yeah.
When they blew that lead. They just weren't able to manufacture points as easily as some of the teams they're playing. And that, I think, will be really important now as Rick constructs that roster or continues to construct it for next year.
Amen to that. I agree with all of that. Let's move off of the men's team, and as we wrap up the basketball portion of the show, talk for a quick moment about the Lady Vols, where it's actually been kind of quiet on the personnel front recently with the Lady Vols, although there's been a change on the coaching staff. Gabe Lazo, who was considered, I believe, the top recruiter for Kim Caldwell, responsible for a lot of that class that came in this past year, he is out. He is moving on. He announced he's going to be an assistant on Kim Mulkey's staff at LSU. Kim was prepared for it because Bill Ferrara from Florida State is coming in as the new associate head coach. All this tells me, CeeLo, we haven't seen many defections for players. There were a couple right off the bat, and then it's gone quiet. But it appears to me that Kim Caldwell is going to get a third season.
Yeah, I didn't think that, given the fact she's only had two and she's Danny White's hire,
Yeah,
as much in disarray as they were, I never really thought that he was going to make a move right now. Give her a third season, make some changes, get some new players. I still think there are going to be more players that leave
I agree.
than we've seen. And I think she's going to have to go out and I think whether it's 5, 6, 7, 8 roster spots, I think when it's all said and done, it's going to look like a completely different basketball team from a personnel standpoint. But, I think it's whatever you think about the job she did or didn't do this year, 2 years is really hard to make a hard and fast assessment on a coach, especially somebody like Kim who has never really coached at this level before. Now, I don't think Tennessee, you want to be a place where you're learning on the job, and it looks a little bit like that's what she's been doing. But in year 3, certainly it's fair to assess where she is and whether she can get Tennessee back to being a top 10 type team.
Yeah. Yeah, all eyes will be on her. That's for sure. And excuse me, I think that it will be interesting. The one to keep an eye on is this top 2 recruit from the class of 26 coming in, Olivia Edwards, who just yesterday she was at workouts for the McDonald's All-American game, and she mentioned that she's steadfast. She was like really looking forward to being a Tennessee Lady Vol and looking forward to what I can do there and help the program that's been storied, in their history. At the same time, what I would say, and I'm not trying to stir it up, but Gabe Lazo, she was connected with him. And, it'll be interesting just to see, because LSU was one of the finalists for her commitment to begin with. So I'm hopeful that she comes to Knoxville. I'm sure Kim Caldwell is too, but it's going to be interesting to watch the dynamics of the next maybe couple of weeks on what happens there, if anything at all. But like I said, a lot of eyes going to be on Kim Caldwell and the Lady Vols next season. She has sure made Lady Vols basketball a hot topic lately. You can't say we haven't been talking about it. All right, before we pivot to baseball and a little football, let's talk for a quick moment about our sponsor. That's the Tate Insurance Group. These folks are wonderful in terms of insurance groups. They are your local insurance team. They're proud to call East Tennessee home. Just like our Vols, they know what it takes to overcome obstacles, to give their all, and show true volunteer spirit for our community. And from home and auto to business coverage, whatever the case, they provide personal service you can count on. And again, they care about what you care about, because this is where they live too. The Tate Insurance Group, local, trusted, always in your corner, right here at home. If you want to learn more about them, feel free to give them a call, area code 865-862-8233, or go online. You can find more information on their website at tateinsurancegroup.com. That's the Tate Insurance Group. Great, great people. And we always appreciate their support of the Lowdown. Let's talk a little Vol baseball. Quick recap of last week. It started with a midweek 4-2 win over South Carolina Upstate. And then the guys followed up with an opportunity to win a series against a less than stellar Vanderbilt team. They were 2-4 in conference play going into last week. The Commodores were. Felt like the Vols could go to Nashville and maybe win, maybe not get a sweep, but perhaps win the series. Well, they blew that opportunity. The boys get swept in a loss weekend series in Nashville. CeeLo, the Vols lose each game in walk-off fashion, all 3 of them, each lost by 1 run. And to add insult to injury, the Sunday game ends in just horrific fashion. Walk-off grand slam. I mean, Friday, the Vols lost 3-2 in 10 innings. They lost 6-5 in 16 innings on Saturday. And then they scored a bunch of runs on Sunday, and they were actually up 15-10 going into the bottom of the 9th. But again, they let Vanderbilt stick around, hit a walk-off grand slam. The team gets swept. They are now 3-6 in conference play, with LSU coming to town this weekend. What do you think, Chris? I'll have one opinion here, and I'm not sure that this necessarily equates to wins, but it feels like there's just no edge on this team at all. And maybe we got spoiled with the way Tony kind of ran things. I don't want this to be a a referendum on Josh Elander, but the stock seems to be kind of falling fast in the eyes of the fan base, at least. But what do you think is missing right now with this team?
It's got to be a little confidence right now because they've been in so many close games and they just haven't been able to win them. I mean, you go back to the Georgia series. They had every chance to win that game, had a 5-run lead in game 3 and fall behind. And they have a home run. It looked like it was going to be a home run that they catch and go over the fence and make the catch. And Georgia wins that one. And then all 3 are walk-off wins for Vandy. So I just think when you start losing like that and you're right there, I mean, think about if you just win 2 of those games, how much different things look right now. If you just win let's say you win the Georgia series, but you win only 1 of 2 or vice versa. So the margin for error in the SEC baseball race is so small. We've seen schools. LSU started poorly last year in conference play, and look at what they came back to do. So I think getting some confidence to where they're hitting the baseball in key situations that they just have not been able to hit. And I don't know if it's their approach at the plate on occasions, but with guys on base, with guys in the scoring position, because they played a lot of close, tight games. And I think that's the main thing right now. I don't think it's a lack of direction from Josh Elander. I don't think it's a lack of talent. I think they certainly got guys. Remember, Tony Vitello is the one that put together this roster.
Right.
This is his roster. And so I think it's there. They've just got to get a little bit of momentum. They haven't been able to do that. Even in the pre-conference part of their schedule. I went to a couple of those games against Wright State and Kent State. They just never could put – and again, a lot of close losses in those games, but they could not put a string of really good offensive performances. I thought up until Sunday, the pitch has been pretty good. The pitch has held in there. And I still think their starting rotation on weekend – is going to be pretty good this year. But they have just got to find a way to get that mojo hitting the baseball. And it's funny when you don't hit in critical situations and you're not delivering in critical situations, you look like a team sometimes that doesn't have much of an edge.
Right.
And all of a sudden you start hitting and make some of those, get some of those key hits when guys are on base. You can change in a hurry. I'm not ready to kick them to the curb. I know that I've seen a lot what's out there, social media and fans talking about, the quote unquote Elander experiment. My comeback to that would be, you know what? You better be careful what you ask for, because this baseball program, and remember, Josh Elander was a big part of it. Has had an incredible run. You look at some of the former Vol players who've taken to social media in defense of Josh Elander, Christian Moore, Drew Beam, basically telling some of these fans, and listen, it's not a lot of them. It's always a loud minority. Basically, you need to go get your head examined if you think it's time to make a move. So let's wait and see how this thing plays out. Let's see if they can get some momentum, Bob. I'm just not ready, never have been, nor will be ready after 3 conference series to say this guy ain't the guy. I think that's way short-sighted.
No, I agree. I think of what you mentioned, Drew Beam, and he was right. It's a good reminder. He reminded people of, hey, 2023, this team was 5-10 at one point in conference play, and ended up going to Omaha still. So, just everybody needs to just kind of give it a little bit of time. Elander made an interesting announcement today. He is no longer going to be coaching third base. He's going to be coaching from the dugout, both offense and defense. Hey, it changed things. I'll give you a live update right now. They're playing Austin Peay in their midweek game, and in the 5th inning, Tennessee's up 11-2. So all's forgiven, man. We're back on track. But no, so really the weekend series that lies ahead at home against LSU is a biggie. Obviously, LSU. Defending national champion. They are only 4-5 in SEC play, but they are fresh off of a series win over a ranked Kentucky team. So that one's going to be tough. But I have, I got this feeling. First of all, I think it'd be if look, if Tennessee could sweep that series, that'd be fabulous. I don't think that would happen, but winning the series feels like, man, that would slow down some of the restlessness that's going on right now with the fan base. Not that it's all about them, but I think that, those guys have to hear some of that. And I'd just love for them to keep getting focused on getting better. So
Mhm.
time will tell. Time will tell. But and you're right. You bring up a great point too. And there was this big debate about some people were saying, well, Tony built this thing and Josh inherited it, and that's a lot harder than what Tony had to build. And I think they're not mutually exclusive. My point, and I've done a lot in my corporate life, CeeLo, building something at the beginning from the ground up is a lot of work. But I'm going to tell you that continuing the level of excellence, that's what's harder. I believe that. So for people to assume that Elander walked into just a posh job here, it's not like that, man. Not in the SEC.
No, and the reality too is how many people out there that are griping right now ever watched one Tennessee baseball game 10 years ago?
Right.
You know,
Right.
there's a lot of bandwagon Tennessee baseball fans based on the last 5 or 6 years. And, you don't
Agree.
just, it's not your God-given right to win. I mean, you look at some of the teams that, and again, the comparison to LSU last year. I mean, I go back to Ole Miss a few years ago when they won the national title. They were the last team in the tournament,
Right.
the very last team in,
Yep.
and they won. So baseball is a different sport. When you get hot and can start hitting, and I do think this team has the bats to do that. You win a couple series, and that's why I think this one this weekend at home against LSU is so critical. Tennessee has a chance at home to get off to a good start and win a series, and things look a lot different, once you win a series in this league.
No doubt. No doubt. Let's talk a little football as we start to put a bow on this show. As I said at the start of the show, football season's coming. Chris, it's just 5 months until another season of Vol football kicks off. But in the meantime, we are in the thick of spring football, with the culmination being the orange and white game on April 11th. As much as we can talk about it, because, the football team's pretty guarded with their information and what they talk about and what we see and everything else. And did I do okay doing that, Chris? Was that a pretty fair statement there?
Wait a minute. You're saying that coaches are paranoid?
Yeah, maybe a little.
I think that's
Little,
I think
little.
that's a part of the DNA to be a coach is you've got to have one of those paranoia type chips.
Yes.
But no, you're right. Not a lot of information comes out of practice at Tennessee.
Now, but what I would say, I do, and maybe I'm trying to pick up too many breadcrumbs here, but I've heard Josh Heupel talk about the quarterback situation with George McIntyre and Faison Brandon. And he hasn't been negative about George, but he's also been pretty effusively positive about Faison. And I don't know, from afar, and I'm up for it. I think we've got two probably really talented guys, both young, but I think maybe this really, like last year, they talked about there being a quarterback competition between Merklinger and Joey Aguilar, and I don't think there was one really.
No,
I think this one could be a legitimate competition, though.
Yeah, no, it is. I spent time with Josh before the start of spring practice, and he was adamant that it would be because number one, he feels like he's got two guys that he can win with, two guys that have a lot of ability and talent. Now they haven't played. Neither one of them played a meaningful snap at the collegiate level, but he likes both their skill level. He likes the fact that they're not completely the same quarterback. One's different than the other. So when you start comparing the two, go through practice, it's not like it's two of the same guy out there. What works? What do you need best? What type of style is Tennessee going to need to win this year? They're going to be throwing, whoever it is, they're going to be throwing to a really good, talented receiving core. I think the tight end position has a chance to be better. And then on defense, Jim Knowles coming in, sort of starting from scratch. They lost a lot of players that were big parts of that team the last couple of years. But I know this, having talked to Jim a little bit when I was over on campus a few weeks ago, they're diving right in. And he brought in a lot of his own guys from Penn State on the staff and players. And, you're going to see them play his style. I don't know how quickly, Bob, that translates onto the field as far as wins and losses, but you'll see them do what his defenses almost have always done. Whether you go back to Oklahoma State or Ohio State, is they come after you. They try different angles, different directions. They try to create a lot of chaos. And I think the big thing is, and we won't know this until they start playing, is they need to tackle better. Tennessee was a bad tackling football team last year.
Yeah.
And I know that's one of his priorities in talking to him, that when they got chances to make plays and stop guys, they got to do it. You can't win consistently if you're letting guys break tackles and you're blowing assignments and missing tackles. But that's part of the defense. People say, well, what do you think's got to change? What needs to change? Well, they need to be a better tackling football team and make more plays in the open field when they can to eliminate some of the big plays that hurt them last year.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a good segue into I think the biggest injury item that has come out so far is regarding David Hobbs, the defensive lineman. I want to believe, I got the impression, and maybe you've heard some stuff too, I'm not sure it's an injury and it's legitimate. I'm not sure it's that serious. I think some of it is when you're in the spring stage, you don't want guys getting like long-lasting injuries. So I think them holding him back now is probably more precautionary at this point. May not be something that would interfere with regular season play, but that so far seems to be the only injury I've heard of note.
Yeah, that's the worst. If you had to pick for Tennessee, what's the worst area where you can have an injury? It's right there in the middle of that defensive line, because they're just not that experienced. They're not probably as deep as they'd like to be. And remember, he was hurt last year some too.
Right.
So he's missing some more time. So that's one to watch, where he is health-wise when they start the season, because with his experience and the fact that, that he, he's played, they're going to need him in there in the middle of that defensive line.
Yeah. Big commitment news over the weekend. We are wide receiver it feels. 4-star class of 27 wide receiver Keyshawn Bowers from Brentwood Academy commits to Tennessee. It's a long time down the road, but it just feels like Josh continues to stack talent in that receiver room.
Yeah, and when you want to protect your state borders,
yeah,
you got kids like that in your state. You got to keep them at home. And I think that's the other thing that's encouraging when you see a player that's garnering a lot of attention. He could have gone a lot of places. And Tennessee gets him. I mean, it's in his system. You would think, and you've seen him recruit at a high level at the receiver position. That system would just scream out to talented receiver prospects, "Hey, I want to play in that system." Look at what Jalen Hyatt did a few years ago. I'm going to get a lot of chances to make big plays, catch the football. So I'm not surprised that they've been able to do that, because, again, I think receivers tend to gravitate to what Josh does on offense.
Yeah. Last thing, and it's not so much about the season ahead, but for some of the guys who contributed so much last season, and one who really didn't contribute, but sounds like Jermon McCoy had one heck of a pro day today. We're seeing it all over social media. The Rocky Top Insider guys were there shooting video of it. Jermon McCoy runs a 4.3840 CeeLo, and as Todd McShay, there was also reports from an anonymous NFL scout that was there, because this was one of the most anticipated pro days out there. Said it looked like this guy hadn't been injured at all the way he performed today in terms of broad jump, vertical jumps, 40 feet, all that.
Well, remember, he got hurt in January.
Yeah.
Training on his own, sort of, unlucky for him, unlucky for Tennessee, and he couldn't play this year. Whether he was cleared or not cleared, he just didn't feel like he was ever to a point where he could go back out there and play. And I know there's a lot of, among all fan bases, they feel like as soon as a guy can walk again, he needs to be back out there on the field. But when you've got a career the way he does, you got to be careful you don't get out there and do something that's you're going to potentially ruin your career at the next level. I think the thing that makes it tricky, Bob, is these guys are all making a lot of money. And
Yeah.
you pay a guy, Tennessee paid him for the whole year, didn't play. And again, most of that's just unlucky. Same thing happened, Juice Wells at South Carolina a few years ago. He played like 2 games and they paid him the whole year. But no, he's a guy that you talk to NFL people, I mean, certainly before he got hurt, his ability to cover and how athletic he is, they felt like he would end up being one of the top corners in the draft. And it looks like that's what he's going to be.
Yeah, agreed. And I will say it was nice seeing some video one last time, maybe of, and I know it wasn't on defense or anything else, but Joey Aguilar, man, he throws a pretty ball to Chris Brazzell. It was nice seeing a little of that too. Those two hooking up one last time.
Yeah, I hope the fans appreciate. I think they will. Joey's 1 year at Tennessee.
Yeah.
The fact that he came in after spring practice, he had 3 months to get ready, and was total class the whole season. Played at a high level, and really, I think if he doesn't come in, if they don't have a chance to get him, I think Tennessee easily could have had a losing season last year, or been flirting with one. So I think he was worth those extra 2-3 wins just based on his play. But he is a guy that, even though he wasn't around for a long period of time, and I hope he does get a shot at the next level, he was a big part of Tennessee this past season, just getting to 8 wins, because it could have been a lot worse had they not been able to get him.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not a bumper crop of quarterbacks this year. So I think he might, outside of, kind of some of the top couple picks at quarterback, there's some projections I've seen him as high as like the 5th available quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems to me like you would think he's going to get his name called during some round in the draft. So I hope that happens for him. That would be great. All right. That does it for us this week. Another episode in the books. We always appreciate you giving us a watch or listen. And as always, we have to say thank you to our fantastic sponsor, the Tate Insurance Group. We'll be back next time to talk more transfer portal news in basketball, because it opens on April 7th. Like I said, there's going to be a lot of activity. Basketball season, it might be over in terms of the games, but there's still some other activity going on. We'll be there to bring it for you in terms of whatever we hear. We'll also talk about whether Vol baseball can bounce back against LSU. Very important series this week. And of course, more Vol football now. We'll continue to talk more and more Vol football as we near the orange and white game. And as always, we'll cover it all for you during the week right here. So keep it locked in on Rocky Top Insider at rockytopinsider.com, and also all the socials where we're present there for the best Tennessee Vol coverage everywhere. Reminder to hit that like and subscribe button for the show on YouTube. Download our podcast wherever you listen to your pods. CeeLo, I don't know if you know this, we're also on the WATE Plus app. So you can turn on your TV if you have a Roku device. You can see our beautiful faces on television, my man.
That's scary.
Yeah, no, it is a little scary. I kind of saw it unexpectedly pop up one day when I opened that app. I was like, whoa, that's us. Okay.
Yeah. After a career of being told that I had a face for radio. So that's really scary.
We appreciate WATE and our partnership with them as well. Always appreciate being able to do this show with you, Chris. I hope you have a great week. I know you're doing a lot of travel around the South for work. So I hope you have safe travels and prosperous travels from a work standpoint.
I will, Bob. Thanks a lot. Look forward to doing this all over again next week. Maybe a few more answers in football as we get closer and closer to the spring game.
Yes, most definitely. And thanks again to all of you out there watching and listening. We'll look forward to joining you again, and you joining us right here next time on the RTI Lowdown.